I'm Hillary. I'm an alcoholic. And nobody got to hear me the last time I was scheduled to speak here because I thought I was doing really good, and I got here at 7:30 and I thought I'd be early. And I was late. But there was this man here speaking, and he must have been from the group because I didn't give any warning that I wasn't coming, and I'd like to thank him for speaking because I needed to hear what he had to say more than I needed to hear myself talk, you know. And I don't know who he was, but I think he had a lot of time, and he was just sort of yanked out for the night. You know, it's nice to be here because I like clubs. I feel like I've been raised in clubs, and every time I go into one, whether it's some of the ones that I've been to and am familiar with or someplace else, there's always like a feeling, you know, there's a feeling that comes with, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous. It sort of permeates rooms, and I think it kept me here. Something about the energy in the club, the Alano Club that I was raised in, I like to say, you know, something about it kept me here, because I know when I got here, I was the type who didn't really want to live. Can I drop this a little? Hi there. I walked into this Alano Club, and it was really neat because I walked in drunk. I'd been in the parking lot drunk for, you know, 4 or 5 days. I was in conflict. I didn't know if I wanted to really get, you know, sober or just stay in the car and die. And a lot of people saw me there, and it's good for me because a lot of people remind me. Even last week, somebody was reminding me about what I was like in the parking lot of the Alano Club, you know. And it, you know, it could be embarrassing, but for me it's real important because I have to remember where I came from. And I came from a bad place when I got here. You know, I wanted to die, and I didn't realize I wanted to die. I didn't realize anything. I walked into the doors of that Alano Club, and I was wearing this really fashionable mauve jumpsuit, and I'd thrown up all over it, and I'd been in it for, you know, 4 or 5 days. I still haven't been able to figure out how many days I was in that car, and nobody's told me that part. They've told me some of the stuff I did getting in and out, and that wasn't real nice, but I came into the club, and I felt like something could happen, you know, that had never happened for me anywhere in my life. And it was something I wanted. And I don't know that I necessarily figured that I wanted what anybody else had in there, but I knew I didn't want what I had, and I knew that what was ever on my insides had to be changed for me to ever be able to live comfortably with myself. And that was the problem I'd always had. You know, that was the problem I had from when I was very small, and I didn't realize why until I got sober. I didn't realize why I was so uncomfortable as a child. I didn't realize anything until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I didn't know who I was, I didn't know who I wasn't, and I felt nothing when I got here. In my first year of sobriety, I know that a lot of topics were at meetings, like fear and like anger and different things that I couldn't relate to, because any of those things that were human and of human emotion I couldn't identify with when I was new, because I was numb. And it took me a long time for that numbness to wear off. I see people now, they come in and they're like in touch with all these things pretty quickly, and it amazes me because I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that at all. I was just like out of touch. But I'd been that way, and I'd had that experience most of my life of being numb. And as a child, I was just forced through situations and through what I learned later on to be a variety of types of abuse. I just sort of shut down when I was a kid. I sort of shut down at about 3. And my life from that point on was really hard to remember. It was hard for me to remember when I got sober. It was hard for me to remember my first years especially, and I got into a horrendous fight with a sponsor who I fired because she told me to write down all this stuff, and I said, I just don't remember. And she said, well, sure you do. And I went, I don't remember anything. And she said, well, sure you do. And I said, fine then, you're fired, you know, because, you know, I'm a little better today, but It was the right thing to do at the time, because I was telling the truth, and when I came here I learned I had to tell the truth to the best of my ability, and that was my ability at the time, and my ability at the time was that I had no memory, and that's what I had to deal with, and it came back slowly, and it came back with a lot of pain, there were reasons why I had no memory, there were definite reasons for this, but they didn't surface all at once because more is revealed as I can handle it according to what God hands out to me, not according to what I feel I ought to know or anybody else feels they ought to know. God puts in front of me what I need in order to walk the journey that Alcoholics Anonymous has laid out for me. And I believe that today. I believed it when I took the third step, and I believe it today. I believe that, this program is a spiritual path to recovery. And I know it says it pretty directly in the Big Book, and it says in the Big Book that anybody who thinks that I'm not saying it exactly right, but anybody who thinks that just not drinking is enough is kidding themselves. And it's the truth, because, I lived without drinking for a number of years at the beginning of my life, and that didn't help me because I was always in some kind of mortal anguish. And if I had to live that way older without drinking, I'd still be in mortal anguish. And living was my problem. When I started drinking, I was happy. It did work for a while. Drinking did work for a while. And when I actually started with drugs first, and it's because I had an incredible fear of alcohol because of things that had happened when I was young. I had terrible fears of alcohol, and I started with drugs. And it didn't make any difference, and it doesn't make any difference to me today because they both alter what's in my head, And in the moments of clarity that I believe brought me to this program, the times of divine intervention, I believe that God was probably always trying to give them to me. I was just too stubborn to notice and too stupid to listen, because the higher power that I have today is there for me all the time. And I know I came in here dependent. I came in here dependent on anything to make me feel better, anything to fix my insides, and anybody to fix my outsides. And I understand today that, that's dependency. And today I finally found where I can depend on the dependable, and that's a higher power. And it's taken this program and working the steps to be able to reach a place where I actually believe that, I actually believe that there's a higher power, and I can actually depend on that higher power to take me through and walk me to anything I have to get through and toward, and I believe that because I've seen it now. When I first came in, I wasn't quite so sure. I heard that's what you did, I heard that's what you did, that you just believed in God, you trust God, you clean house, and it's sort of a shallow job in your first year, but I gave it my best shot because that's what you're supposed to do, and I did everything that I could according to my abilities at the time, and I wasn't very honest, and I wasn't very thorough, and my inventory wasn't very moral, and, but it was the best I could do, and that's what God wanted from me, that's what God wants from all of us, I believe, for us to do the best we can with what we have at that time. And as time went on, my best got better. Because I know when I look back, things that I did that I thought were really honest and, my motives were pure and stuff like that. When I look back, a couple of years, my motives were still bad and, there was nothing pure about it, but I thought at the time that I was doing the right thing. And God appreciates my best shot, and that's all I'm required to give here today. And I want to do that, I want to do that because, well, for one reason, lately I see a lot of people that haven't bought the whole package, and it frightens me. It really frightens me. This program is laid out pretty specifically in the Big Book. It's, summarized down here on your podium. Don't drink, don't use, whatever your substance is, don't do that. Read the Big Book, go to meetings, and a little direction's always good, A lot of direction's even better. But it's pretty simple. It's really a pretty simple program. But sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it's hard to walk through things. But one of the miracles here is that we find people I can always find somebody who's been through what I'm embarking on, or who has a lot of strength to share with me about something that I feel is insurmountable. There's always somebody. And, that was never true for me. Last night I had this opportunity to do a short pitch at Fellowship Hall, someplace that, Randy used to spend a lot of time. And while I was there, it was neat because I don't go there all the time, but it's one of the places that I sobered up. It's one of the places that I sobered up. And when I sobered up, there was Fellowship Hall, and there was an Alano Club, a few blocks away, and there was this hotel called the Falding, down right around the corner. And that's where I sobered up, in the Falding Hotel. And I mean, it may be Santa Barbara, but that's the pits in Santa Barbara. It's actually one of the worst places you could ever be. And it was difficult for me, it was scary. It was scary being in there. And I remember I'd go into my room, I'd run into my room, and I'd lock the door, and I'd pray, and I'd understand that God was going to take care of me through this terrifying time, because it was on the street where there's a lot of knifings and there's a lot of violence. And I'd been on the streets to a certain extent, but I was fortunate that I never had to live, through a lot of adult violence. I lived through a lot of child violence, but I never had to live through a lot of adult violence. So that kind of stuff really scared me. But I remember thinking that. And then I was on welfare, and I had to walk down the street to this cafe that was run by junkies. And they gave me little coupons to eat with when I first sobered up. And I'd walk down there, and I'd have my little coupon, and I'd sit in there, and I'd eat. And there were all these junkies running the place, and there were people coming in doing all kinds of strange things, the cops running in and out. And it was pretty wild, and I'd sit there just totally conscious of the fact that I was protected by a higher power because I was doing the right thing. I was doing the right thing, and I was going to be okay. I don't know if it was, ignorance or what, but I have a little better understanding of that kind of dependency on God today. And last night I was there, and I was remembering all those times, and it's good for me to remember those times. It's good for me to remember how far down I had to go before I'd stop drinking, and I had to go to the bottom, because I was raised in a pretty wealthy family, and they don't really acknowledge, any alcoholism in it at all, even me. And there's a bunch of them. There's really a bunch of them. I was thinking about that, too, last night, because we were thinking about Christmas and families and stuff like that. I was thinking about how many members of my family were alcoholics, how many are drug addicts, how many, want to kill themselves, how many have done this and how many have done that. And they're usually at least three. Every single person has at least three major difficulties. But not one of them has done anything to change their insides. And all of them ignore that there are any problems with any of us at all, and that what we need to deal with each other in is patience. This guy who took the cake was saying his mom was an Al-Anon, and I had a sister. And my sisters were really good at rescuing me. I have three older sisters, and they all rescued me a lot. I was always screwing up, and I was the youngest child, and they were all older than me, a lot older than me, and they felt some sort of responsibility, or maybe saving the family's name or something, to pick me up out of these places I'd end up and, take me home with them for whatever the reason. And they all did it. They all did it. My parents never did it, but my sisters all did. They'd bring me home, they'd feed me, they'd take care of me, they'd, try and get me jobs or whatever. They did, all of them did their thing a little different. And in the last year of my drinking, I was hospitalized. I was put in mental institutions like 6 or 7 times because I'd crack up all the time, And I'd go in those hospitals, and they'd treat me with drugs, which never worked. And then I'd come home to one of my sister's house, and I had this great excuse. I was either, manic depressive or suicidal or whatever, the doctor wanted to call me, all of which titles were wrong. But I could use those things. I could say, hey, well, don't push me because I'm a manic depressive. Or don't push me because fill in blank, whatever they said. And, they'd buy it. These sisters of mine would buy it. And I don't know why, but they did for a long time. And then one of them put me in a Christian recovery home for mostly addicts, and it was all right, I was one of them too, but they put me in this Christian recovery home, and I didn't like that at all, For one thing, they made me stop smoking, and for another thing, they wanted to exorcise me. I mean, they'd all be chanting over me, trying to get, they were trying to get my devils out, and I didn't believe that the devil was the problem. I didn't really know what was the problem, but I didn't believe it was the devil, And I bailed from that place, and I had gotten 2 blocks down the street and ripped off a couple of bottles of something and made a phone call and was picked up and out on the loose, out of control for a few weeks before I finally, found AA. And the way that I found it was that I was stuck in this place. It was Oxnard. I was in I had been chased around by the police because I had a felon in my car, and I didn't know who that felon was. But the whole first year I was sober, the police kept trying to find me to find out who this felon was and what we were doing and stuff like that. And I didn't know, and I kept saying, hey, if I saw him today, I might not know who he was. I don't think I would. He could be here. But I had been down there, and I'd been, I don't know what I'd been, but I'd been in some kind of trouble because the police were after me, and all I could remember that whole time I was down there was that I had to make this phone call. I had to make this phone call, and this phone call was to my sister, and it was at a phone booth, or maybe she was calling. I don't remember that either, but I was there, and that's a miracle in itself, And I was at this phone booth, and I was talking to my sister, and I always thought she was a real sap. And she said to me, Hillary, there's something I have to tell you. And I went, okay. And she said, I've talked to someone. And I went, yes. And she goes, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but I believe you're an alcoholic. And I went, well, that's a thought. It was a new twist. But then she said, and what I have to do is tell you that there's nothing I can do for you. And I thought, that's a real new twist. And she told me that. She said she could not do anything for me if I came to L.A., not to come to her house unless I was sober, and that if I came down to L.A. to please give her the keys to her house. And if, she gave me all this list of stuff that I could no longer do, not even show up. I mean, she had no reason to be upset with me. I only drank all of her, alcohol from every place in her house she could stash it. And I did it, with her kids. I told you, it's all over the family. Now her kids doing it didn't bother her, but me doing it did. And interesting. But she told me all this stuff, and she said, so what you're going to have to do is seek help, and you're going to have to seek help from somebody who knows how to handle this, and it's not me. And I have this number for you to call, because I can't help you anymore. I've been told, and I'm convinced that there's nothing I can do for you. So I went, okay. And it was like my lifeline had been cut off because another sister had thrown me out, and the oldest sister was a little on the tough side. So it was like all my options closed up on me. So I decided the only opening I had for anything was to call this number, and I called this number, and it was the Alano Club in Ventura. And this lady came out. And she 12-stepped me. And the first thing we had to do when she came out was get this other guy, the new guy out of the car. I had a new one in the car, and he was a wet brain, the bona fide town wet brain. He couldn't talk. He could hardly walk. And what had happened was that I was driving down the street, and I saw him walking, and he seemed so sad. I didn't know I was identifying with him, but he just seemed so sad and so lost and so beyond hope that I drove up right next to him for no reason and opened the door and invited him into my car. I mean, I knew he couldn't hurt me. He was sort of incapable. But he couldn't talk. He couldn't do anything, this man. And I just drove around with him till I called my sister. But I did have a couple of quarts of bourbon and vodka, and he really lit up when he saw that. He really lit up, and he drank a whole bunch, and he just, not more than me though, and he just sort of laid there. Really, he just sort of laid there. And then this lady, when she came to talk to me, said that, he was a wet brain, which I didn't know what that meant, and she said to just get him out of the car and we'll just lay him on this bush because it was familiar to him. Okay. So, but she took me into McDonald's, and she took me off into the corner and all this kind of stuff, and she sat me down and she started to tell me about alcoholism, a thought that never occurred to me. I want you all to know this, that when this happened, I couldn't go for more than 2 hours without drinking. I could not go for more than 2 hours. I could not make it through the night. When I woke up in the morning, I was one of those who had to throw up a few times, and then finally get it down. But I was on a real short alcohol consumption cycle. I had to do it. I always had big purses with quarts in them and stuff, because I couldn't make it. And I stole a lot. I got really good at stealing large bottles. I think it's the only material thing I ever stole was alcohol. So this lady, she sat me down, she started talking to me about alcoholism, and I was amazed. It had never occurred to me. I knew I was drinking a lot. I didn't know that meant anything. I didn't know alcoholism was a disease. I didn't know it was progressive. I didn't know that it had anything to do with craving. I didn't know it had anything to do with the emptiness, the loneliness, the fear, the guilt. I didn't know anything about it. And she sat down and she talked to me about alcoholism. And I was identifying, I was going. It was like all of a sudden there was an answer. And I didn't belong in the mental ward, although that's questionable, But, who knows? But, there was an answer. And after the answer, there was a possible solution. And she said things to me about my insides that really made a lot of sense, because she said things to me about, why I had so much trouble living sober, which is something that I think every alcoholic has trouble doing until they have the program of AA, is living sober. And I know that was my problem. I could live barely, but life to me before I drank and life to me after I drank when I wasn't drunk or using something was like white-knuckling it. My life was an entire white-knuckle experience. That's what the whole thing was like until I got to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, I don't know if everybody has that experience, but I know for me it was really true. That was my problem. I was just tweaked out on the inside, and I couldn't live without some kind of substance, something to take the edge off. And then after it took the edge off, finally, something to take me to oblivion, because after a while the edge wasn't enough. And I went through a lot of experiences, when I was drinking. I went through a lot of bad experiences. There's one experience I had that I look back on, as alcoholic thinking, because it was like the first time I ever mixed drugs and alcohol, and I was married. My husband had encouraged me to drink because I was too neurotic. I was like... And he'd take me to places. He was real social. And he'd take me to places and want to introduce me to people, and I'd go out the back door, and he was just embarrassed by me constantly because I would not stay in the room. I was painfully shy, totally neurotic, and I didn't want to talk to anybody. I wanted to hide, and I wanted to be left alone. So he decided the solution to that was that I should drink so I could be more comfortable around him and his friends. And I tried it, and one night, I had been taking a lot of speed, and I took a lot of speed, and, the variety had changed or something, and it wasn't working the way it was supposed to. So then I decided that what I'd do is I'd have a few drinks, and I hadn't drank that much at this time, but I had a few drinks, and it was getting late, and now I wanted to go to sleep, and nobody was there, and I didn't want to party or anything, so it was like I wanted to get it over with. So I had the speed, I had the alcohol, and then I couldn't go to sleep, so I took a bunch of antihistamines because, there was nothing to do. And I went to bed, and I thought I was going to go to sleep, and I may have for a little while, but I woke up with this big pink genie by my bed. He was like 6'5", and he had on harem pants, and he was bald with a shaved head, the kind of guys you see in the movies, only he was pink. And obviously it was a bad combination, and I was like really sick, I was really sick, and the next morning I thought about it, and I decided probably that I shouldn't take antihistamines anymore. And that to me, as I look back, was alcoholic thinking, you know. I mean, that's alcoholic thinking. Cut out anything but the stuff that really works for you. So, you know, I had some great experiences. I was in jail a few times. I was in hospitals. And in the last year, I hurt my finger. In the last year of my drinking, when my family was sick of me and I didn't have any friends left and all this other stuff was going down the tubes, I ended up in the hospital, and I was on the operating table. They were operating on me, and I woke up, and they were in my stomach somewhere, and they were trying to get something out. And I woke up, and I was laying there, and there's something in my mouth, my head like this. Everything was taped down. I'm going, you know, these guys ought to know about this, and because I was waking up. And I couldn't think of what to do, because how do you tell a doctor that you're awake when your mouth is full of stuff? But I started moving my fingers, and I heard somebody, I don't know if it was the anesthesiologist or the doctor, but they said, my God, she's coming to. And the doctor, whose voice I recognized, said, what do you expect? She's been putting away over a quart of scotch a day. You can't keep somebody like that under, you know. And then I started to go out again. And I had talked to my doctor a little about it. I had talked to my doctor a little about it, and he said, well, you ought to cut back on your drinking. And the people in the hospitals never even addressed my drinking. You know, they were busy trying to find, they were just trying to keep me quiet. You know, they give you those drugs to keep you quiet. You walk funny, and you sit down, and they do that kind of stuff to you, because I don't know why, you know, but since I've been sober, I've thought that maybe I should go on some kind of mission into the hospital to help the alcoholics escape, because I'm sure there's a bunch of them in there, you know. I really, you know, I mean, it happened to me. I know I'm not the only one. And I see it today. People come into the program, and then there's this one guy I know, and the doctors have him on drugs. And I mean, I can't say that he's not psychotic, but I really don't think so, you know. I really don't think so. But they have him on all these drugs. And I told him, he said, I feel so much better. I said, well, of course you do. You're on drugs. And he said, no, it's the program. I said, the program doesn't work when you're on drugs. There's a catch. I said, you may feel better, but it's not the program. Trust me on this one. You know, he got real mad at me. He did. But he's, you know, who knows? You know, if you really want to get well, what I've understood is that if you really want to get well, or better, let's not push it, but if you if you really want to get better, you can, you know, you can. But you have to take this program as a package. The package to me really includes working the steps. It really includes talking to people. It really includes working with others. It includes everything that you hear as a basic. And what I started off saying, you know, 2 days ago was that one of the things that scared me was that I see a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of people get like, you know, 3, 4, and 5 years, and they aren't the people that have, you know, bought the package. They haven't bought the package. I had to put a friend of mine in a recovery home last year, you know, and she had like 4.5 years, and I had to put her into a recovery home because she was going crazy sober. And what I understand from all this, and what I'm glad I understand from all this, is that alcoholism is a disease. You know, it doesn't go away because you're not drinking. It does not go away. We're bodily and mentally different, you know. I'm very different, you know. In here I'm different, and I know that I need all the help that I can get to keep that contact with my higher power in order to stay sober. In order to let this program work for me, I have to do the steps and do the basics in order to keep that grace flowing through me, the same grace that initially got me when I had that moment of clarity. You know, and that's what I believe happens. We have a moment of clarity, and we're stricken with grace. You know, just stricken with grace. And when that happens, you know, there's an awareness that comes along. And when that happens, it's the beginning of a long process of, you know, the spiritual path to recovery. And all of that is, you know, all of that is important, and all of that is necessary to form this relationship with a higher power, because that's what's going to keep you sober. That's what keeps me sober. And all the basics that are given out here are the things that keep that channel open for me to have a relationship with my higher power. And I firmly do believe that God brought me here. And any time that I doubt that, all I have to do is go where the winos are, or possibly even turn on the TV. TV's insane. I watch these shows, and it's just like there's violence everywhere. It scares me to death. I remember when I was little, I used to worry about what I was going to be when I grew up because the world was going to end. And I feel the same way. What am I going to be when I grow up? Because the world's going to end. And that part has never changed. But there's a lot of violence out there, and there's a lot of trouble on the streets, and there's a lot of things going on out there. And when I see that, either for real in real life or when I see it on TV, I go, why me? Why? Why was I removed? Why was I removed from this? Why am I so lucky? Why am I so blessed? And I don't really have any answer for that. I don't have any answer for that. All I can say is that some people are out there and some people are in here. And if you're lucky enough to be in here, do everything in your power to stay. When I got here, I knew that something was happening, and I couldn't describe it. It felt positive. It felt like maybe hope. And it felt like a solution, but I couldn't really describe it at the time. There was just something. It's the attraction rather than promotion, an indescribable attraction. And when I came here, I was told by people who I wanted to listen to that what I had to do first was the first step, and I had to ask God to remove my obsession to drink, because I had a very strong obsession to drink. I did not want to stop. I was scared to stop drinking. I was scareder to stop, and I was scared to go on drinking, but I was more scared to stop because I couldn't figure out what would I do without alcohol? What would I do without it? How does a person live without alcohol? How does a person like me live without alcohol? I didn't know. I didn't know. And the people here told me, what you do is you ask God to remove that obsession. I was almost scared to ask him to remove the obsession because I was scared to live without it. I was scared to live without it. And I looked around, and a lot of people seemed to be able to function. They seemed to be able to function without drinking. And they said they drank like me. And I went, okay. Okay, I'll try. And I asked this higher power, who I always believed was there, but I never believed was there for me. I asked him to remove that obsession to drink. And he did. And that was damn impressive. That was really impressive. For somebody like me to have the obsession to drink removed, I was impressed. And I was at that moment, I believe, just willing to go to just about any lengths to do anything this program had to offer. I think that was just sort of a gift that I got when I got here. I was willing to go for it. Somebody came up to me the other day and told me that. They said, Hillary, you came in the door and you went for it, And that to me is a compliment, because it's something that has to happen. Because I see people go for it, and then I see them stop, and I see them go out. And then, I come up here, and Randy's sitting there, and we're talking about people we know down in Santa Barbara, and a few of them are dead. And I go, why? Why? What happens? What happens? What happens? I don't know, but I know they weren't going for it. This program can save lives, It not only saved my life, it also gave me the desire to be alive, and that's something I didn't have when I got here. I was so insane, I was so insane that I didn't realize that I wanted to die. I didn't realize anything, I was numb. I took the second step without much understanding of what alcoholic insanity was. I took the second step without much understanding of what insanity was. I found out in time, I found out what the insanity was all about with time. But I took it, and then I took the third step, because what I wanted more than anything was to be able to walk a path that others had walked before me that seemed to be the answer and the solution to a life that had no meaning for me. I understood when my higher power took this obsession away from me, I understood at that time that he had better intent for me than I had for myself. And that if I was going to get anywhere, even if I knew where that was or not, that my higher power was going to have to set the course for me, because my judgment sucked. You know, it was bad. I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know what people to hang around with. I didn't know how to dress. I didn't know how to talk. I didn't know anything. And I was laid at my feet was this opportunity to become a human being by the guidance of someone who cared for me. And that impressed me, because I knew I did not care for myself. And I knew it was going to be a long time before I cared for myself, you know, because I really didn't. I didn't care. I could walk around and sort of act like I cared, and I could sort of walk around and act like I was interested in other people, but I really wasn't, you know. I really wasn't when I got here. I was just sort of, you know, doing it, but to the best of my ability, and that's all that's required. And when I took the third step, I believe it was one of the more dramatic times of my sobriety, because that the higher power who I was wanting to know became very clear to me, you know, on the inside. The love of my higher power became very clear to me, and it became very clear that I was in the hands of a father, you know. That was something I always wanted, too, because my father was not good at all. And that if I allowed this higher power and the help of Alcoholics Anonymous and the steps to keep that channel open, if I allowed this to continue, that I may end up not anything that I thought I'd be, but something that somebody who loved me thought I could be. And the odds were a lot better if I wasn't going to try and manage this myself, you know. The odds would be a lot better. And so I did that, and I believed in that third step, and I believe everything that third step says about overcoming difficulties, because I have, you know, victory, you know, helping others, all those things that it says in the third step, I believe today. I can't tell you how deeply I believe them. And I took the fourth step, and the fourth step, you know, I had to wait a while and change sponsors and all that, but I finally got the fourth step out, and it was sketchy at first. I've had to do more since because of the memory thing, but when I did the fourth step, it was boring. You know, it was just my life. It was boring because I knew it already. It was just like writing it down. But the fifth step released me from a lot. You know, the fifth step released me. Not only did a fifth step release me from a lot of myself, but it also gave me compassion for a lot of other alcoholics, because I was still bound into myself. I was still really bound into myself. Even though I was walking around and talking to people and stuff like that, you know, I wasn't really, the walls were not down. You know, the walls were not down. I was still too frightened. Something about the fifth step was my beginning of becoming a human being. I could experience compassion for somebody else, you know. I could actually experience compassion. And when I quit pointing the finger so much, you know, I used to look at everybody else who was exactly like me and call them names silently. And then after my fifth step, I realized I was pointing at myself all the time, you know. And I started to have a little more compassion, you know, for other people, and take the light, you know, the spotlight off other people. And then I had to, you know, move on the steps to the, you know, the sixth and the seventh. The sixth step I stayed on a long time, you know. Somebody told me to. They just said, hey, read it and keep talking to me. My sponsor, she says, read it, keep talking to me. Read it and stay in touch. But read it a lot and stay in touch. And sure enough, you know, I got introduced to my character defects, because I wasn't real clear on how much they interfered with all my relationships with people and with my higher power. And it was at that time I understood that I have to have help with my defects, not only because it impairs my relationship with others, but also because it impairs my relationship with God. And that is the reason why I'm here, you know, and that will always be my most primary focus, is that relationship with a higher power, because I owe my life to that relationship, and I have to do everything to keep that relationship intact and getting stronger. And I'm happy to say it does get stronger. The seventh step, I asked them, you know, I asked for God to remove these defects, and, you know, it's sort of up in the air situation. Everything doesn't get to go, unfortunately, but it gives you something to do down here, you know, work on your defects. And I've got a lot of them, you know, I've got a lot of them, and I was listening to a man who I really liked last night, and he's a friend of mine, and I'm really happy he's a friend of mine. I've talked to him a lot, and he was talking about defects, character defects. Don't get too obsessed about your character defects because you're an alcoholic, because every human being has character defects. That actually is the plight of being a human being, is that you're not perfect. If you were divine as opposed to human, you wouldn't be walking here in the Alano Club or anywhere else, But the fortunate thing about having the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is that we can learn how to deal and grow with our character defects. And we have to, because it's our life, and I have to, because I know defects can make me drink. They may not make somebody else drink, but they'll make me drink, and I can't do that. So unfortunately, or fortunately, I have to get better. I have to get better. And that's another blessing of this program, because I'm certainly not a well woman, but I'm better than I was when I got here. I think probably the second most miraculous step to me was the 8th step, because I had to spend a lot of time dealing with forgiveness, especially forgiveness with members of my family. I had to spend a lot of time dealing with forgiveness on them because I was angry. I was real angry at things that had happened to me, real angry. And I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know where to put it. I didn't know how to handle it. And all I'd done most of my life was stuff it and be real depressed about it. And with a lot of help, and the 8th step, I managed to experience forgiveness for the members of my family one by one. And it was the most freeing experience that I've had in sobriety, is to be released from a deep bondage, born of pain that I had with my family. And I didn't know how I was going to get through that one. I really didn't know how I was going to get through that one, because it was pretty intense. It was a heavy situation I had to deal with, and I wasn't looking forward to it. But on the other hand, no matter what the problem is, I have found that no matter what the problem is, no matter what the disorder is, no matter what's wrong with you in your mind, your soul, your heart, your gut, no matter what's wrong with you on the inside, the solution is always here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've found that because I've suffered from things other than alcoholism, and I found the solution here. I can always find the solution here. Sometimes it takes me a little longer, because not everybody else, it's not everything that has affected me in my life is a result of alcoholism, but there's a lot of things that have affected me. But the miracle is the solution is always here. And I never expected that to be true either. But when I came in and I looked at the big book, I remember one time sitting there reading this and thinking, and I must have been in like my first 4 months or something, but I remember sitting there thinking, this journey that they're suggesting in this book could go as deep as I allow it. This transformation that's born of some kind of spiritual path can go as deep as I will allow it. This internal conversion, this spiritual experience they're talking about can go as deep and affect me as broadly as I allow it. And I wanted that bad, because I knew that I knew that I needed a lot of help. I knew that I had to be changed completely over on the inside, because I was very sick, very, very sick in every area when I got here. And I'm grateful today to know that the solutions are here, because I work with people and I have the privilege of telling them what the solutions are for a lot of things here. And that's a real gift for me. It's a real gift to be able to share different aspects of recovery. Because there is so much to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous if you take the whole package. That girlfriend that I was talking about, who I put back in the recovery home, all she did was go to an occasional meeting. She was very big on the social life, the social part of AA. And for 4.5 years, she had been socially involved in AA and occasionally went to meetings. And at 4.5 years, she went crazy. And you know why? Because alcoholism is a disease. It's a progressive disease. And if we don't treat it on a daily basis, it gets worse, whether we're drinking or not, I mean, I have a disease that I have to treat daily. If I want to go to an occasional meeting, I'm risking my sanity. I don't care to risk that today. If I don't want to work the steps, I'm risking trouble. If I don't buy the whole package, I'm risking a lot, and I've seen it happen. And I don't want to live that way. There's enough things to recover from without having to add being a periphery person in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've seen that a lot lately. It frightens the hell out of me. It just really frightens the hell out of me, just slowly, They just sort of go crazy. Or they go out and drink. And fortunately, because this one was my girlfriend, I had to drag her to a recovery home. She said, I'm not getting better. The hardest thing I had to do was say, you're right. You're right. You're not. I don't know what's wrong. And I was tired of going over to her house in the morning to see if she was alive or if she killed herself, I was tired of it. And I couldn't, there was nothing I can do. I could not transplant my feelings about Alcoholics Anonymous in her. But I could take her someplace where she might be able to start over, find out what she missed or whatever went wrong. I mean, I can't judge what went wrong, but I sure knew that something was off. And she went back, She went into that recovery home and she got a new foundation. And she realized that, it's a package deal. And today she's living the package deal. And she's a whole lot happier person, She's a whole lot happier person. I'm a whole lot happier person. This program has done miracles for me. It's done absolute miracles. I realized this year especially how much more different I am on the inside. I was talking to this man the other day who was, he was there when I came in, and I scared him to death. I scared him absolutely to death when I came in. And sometime in my first month of sobriety, I got the flu or something, and I asked him if I could go to his house and heat up this can of chicken soup, and he wouldn't let me because he was scared of me. And he was telling me about this the other day. He said, I was scared of you. You look terrible. You look like you might knife me or something, I'm going, come on. He goes, Hillary, you were different then. And I have people reminding me of that all the time. People who saw me come in here. People who saw me in the parking lot drunk. People who saw me fall on my face sober and have to get up. It's an ego-smashing program. And we got a lot of ego to smash, I got a lot of ego to smash. And I'm getting to do it again. It's just another opportunity. Just the same as when I first got sober. Once again, I resigned from a job. It was okay. I was managing an Alano club. And I stayed there for a long time, and I did good, and I was real happy with it, and it was time to go. And after that happened, I couldn't get another job. It's been a few months. And I had to go back to the welfare office. Something I never thought would happen. I had to sit in there. And then I have to go down there and volunteer and sit down there all day. And with these incredible people that are on welfare, there's this one guy very damaged from Agent Orange, another guy who's, been injured some other way, another alcoholic who doesn't want to stop, and, they should bring in the press corps because we solved all the world's problems in that room in the welfare office. We've all sat in there and figured out everything. It's great, it's great. But there I am, There I am, back there again, and I don't know, I don't know what's going to happen to me. I got every time, I'm not good on change like a lot of people around here aren't so good on changing. It took me a little while to adjust to what I was going to have to do on a daily basis because I have to go there and I have to go to Voc Rehab and I have to go on job interviews, and it's like I have to be in this surrendered state to all these possibilities all the time. And that's been hard for me because usually I go in one place convinced that this was it. Now 3 times a day I may have to be have three different attitudes. The only way I can handle it is back to exactly where I thought when I did that 3rd step, which is surrender it all, do the footwork, and God will put right in front of me where I'm going to end up anyway. And if I mess around with it, it'll just take longer. It'll just take longer. So that's what I'm doing today, and it's very similar to things I had to do when I was first sober. I heard that, you have to go through sober what you went through drunk, but I didn't think I was going to have to go through sober what I went through sober, but, who cares? Who cares? This is what I have to do today, and this is what God has put in front of me. And the miracle about it all is that I understand that if I keep doing what I'm doing, that I'm going to be where God wants me to be, and maybe not where I want myself to be or think I should be, but it's always going to end up better, because the conviction I have and the understanding that I have of this program is that you buy the package, you do all the things that are suggested, you don't put anything into your system that's going to mess up your relationship with your higher power. You keep the channel open with the basics, and you do the footwork. And all footwork does is keep you busy till God puts it there for you. And that's what I'm waiting for today. That's what I'm waiting for today. I just sort of hustle around doing a strange variety of footwork. But I meet a lot of people. It's sort of fun sometimes, And it's, the whole me that's here now is a complete different person, and I have to believe that this program is a miracle maker. It's just a miracle maker. And anything that you come in here thinking you could be, if you surrender, you'll be a whole lot more. You will just be a whole lot more. And no one is more surprised than I am. And I'd like to thank you all for being here.